to the Unquendor Guitars workshop. My name is Daniel and this is the third part in the video series where I'm building the Phoenix Rising guitar, and in this episode I'm going to be focusing on making the neck blank. Usually I custom order my neck blanks from my wood supplier. He provides a service where he makes these neck blanks to my specifications and it saves me a whole lot of time. But for this video I thought it would be nice to once again make a neck blank myself here in the new workshop. I now have a better bandsaw and my thickness sander is fortunately back from repairs and it seems to be running good now, so fingers crossed it will be doing so during this episode. So yeah, without further ado, let's start making the neck blank for this guitar build by looking at the wood I've selected for this guitar neck, and it's a piece of Khaya Mahogany. It's a species of mahogany and a nice piece of flamed maple, and the neck on this guitar is going to be mostly mahogany with 2 stripes of flamed maple. A bit like this neck blank but the other way around. So the outer parts and the center piece are going to be mahogany with 2 stripes of flamed maple with a tiny bit of black ebony veneer in between all the parts. And yeah, if I don't forget to give you a close-up of this neck blank, there are tiny stripes, black stripes in between all these parts of the neck. So in total it's going to be a 9-piece laminated neck blank. For measurements I'm going to use approximately 100 millimeters wide. It depends a bit on the template. As thick as I can get it, somewhere between 50 and 60 mils. I'm aiming for 55 millimeters up to 60 millimeters with 50 as a minimum. That's because I'm going to create an angled headstock without doing a scarf joint. My guitars don't have a scarf joint but are made of a single neck blank, so there's no joint somewhere in the middle of the neck. It's something I prefer. I'm not going to into any discussion which one is better. This is just my preference. So yeah, we're going to make a neck blank 100 millimeters wide, 55 thick and about a meter long depending on the template. I haven't measured it yet. So I've got my pieces of lumber, like I said, and things I keep in mind. What I like for my neck, for my necks, is the grain direction. I like to use quarter sawn neck blanks. And for those who are unfamiliar with the term quarter sawn means that if you have your neck blank, the grain direction is vertical, so from top to bottom, and hopefully it shows up on camera. I've indicated it with some lines that the grain direction on this piece of mahogany is indeed quarter sawn, except this is a square piece, and when I flip it around a quarter turn, and now it's what's called flat sawn, so the grain direction is going from left to right. It's more clear on this piece of maple because it has the good orientation for the neck blank, and you can see that the grain direction is almost perfect vertical, so going like this over the neck instead of flat sawn. And it's said by many guitar builder or many luthier that quarter sawn wood is more stable than flat sawn wood when you're going to use it for a neck. But yeah, I know there are guitar builders that also use flat sawn wood and say that will work fine as well. So yeah, like many things in guitar making, there are different opinions for all kinds of things. Quarter sawn versus flat sawn wood is one of those. I'm not sure. I've always used quarter sawn because it makes the most sense to me and gave me the best results. But yeah, especially with a multi-laminated neck, if you take a bit care of making a good laminate, and we're going into more detail about that in this video, your neck will be fine. It will be stable enough, especially because we're using double action truss rods these days. So a bit of flex or a bit of bend in your neck will be corrected by the truss rod. But of course, we're going to do our best to make the neck as straight and stable as possible without the need of a truss rod. But the truss rod will be there in case we might need it when the guitar comes under tension in a couple of weeks. So yeah. Like I said, I like to use quarter sawn wood for my neck blanks. And yeah, first thing I'm going to do is make sure my bandsaw is set up properly. So I see you at the bandsaw. And then we'll be cutting the first actual wood for this guitar. So in order to cut smooth and plane down all these little strips for the neck blank, it's very important that all the machines and equipment and tools I'm going to use are set up to almost perfection. And I'm not an expert, especially on setting up bandsaws. To give you any advice or do a full tutorial on how to set up a bandsaw, there's plenty on YouTube already about setting up your specific brand of bandsaw. So I'm not going into too much detail, but what I can do for this video is give you some pointers or some things you have to take extra care of, so to say, when it comes to setting up your bandsaw, and to make sure you get a nice, straight and perfect cut from a piece of raw lumber or timber. Timber? I don't know. Where was I? Yeah, so you get the best result for your neck blank. Of course, first thing is the blade you're going to use. I will advise to use the widest blade possible that will fit your bandsaw. I'm using a 19mm wide blade, and that's almost the biggest this Laguna bandsaw can handle. I know the manual says it can handle up to 20, but the tension on this 19mm blade is already to the max. I can hear the bandsaw having a bit of trouble with this wide of a blade. It's powerful enough, but the overall construction is starting to struggle with this wider blade. So yeah, a wide blade. The number of tooth per inch, so the TPI, doesn't really matter. As a rule of thumb, the lower the number on TPI, the less teeth there are for each inch or stretch of your bandsaw blade, making it a somewhat rougher cut, but the cut will be faster and maybe tiny bit more accurate, because there is less chance of sawdust getting in the way of your saw blade, making it start to wander a bit more. So blade, very important. I also mentioned it already. Blade tension, make sure your blade is tensioned properly. My bandsaw has an indicator which is not really reliable. I have another method of making sure my blade is tensioned properly by letting it run and tuning it like a guitar string, but it's a bit of a controversial method. So yeah, I recommend looking up some tutorials online about your specific brand of bandsaw and how to set it up. There's plenty of instruction videos already out there made by actual experts for a particular bandsaw. So blade tension, guides. Next step would be make sure your guides are set up properly. Again, refer to the manual of your bandsaw, how to set up your guides for your bandsaw. And most importantly is setting up your flange properly. Every bandsaw has a natural tendency to drift one way or the other. So when you're putting up your fence for the first time and expect to have a perfectly straight cut when using your fence, most likely your cut will wander one way or the other. So yeah, again, look up the manual, look up a video on your specific brand and type of bandsaw and learn how to set up your fence properly. Mine is already set up and it took me quite some time, to be honest. Everything, of course you have to practice it, and with practice you get faster, but setting up your bandsaw perfectly, especially for the first time, will take you a couple of days or at least a couple of hours. I've also put some wax, some paste wax on my bandsaw table so it's nice and smooth, so everything will slide over it like butter. And another great tool, it's not necessary, but I found it very helpful to make these cuts, is this tool by Bow Products. I'm not sponsored, I'm not affiliated with Bow Products. This is something I bought with my own money when I saw it in a store, and I thought, well, this is perfect for cutting guitar tops, neck blanks, and every straight cut you need to make against your fence. And it's a pretty simple tool. It has a holder, these are two separate products to be honest, that slides into the slot in my bandsaw table. I can use these knobs to tighten it down, and then I can adjust it to my fence for the thickness of wood I'm going to be cutting, and it helps me press my workpiece against the fence when making the cut. Of course, how could I forget, before I can start cutting these strips on the bandsaw, I have to make sure at least one of the edges is nice and straight and square to the rest of the neck. So let's check it first using a straight edge. And there's still some light peeping through, so this edge isn't perfectly straight just yet. Let's check for square. It's pretty square. This edge is slightly higher, so I'm going to need to use my hand plane, my trusty number 7, and start planing down this edge. When planing, of course, start with your blade all the way retracted. Make sure it's nice and sharp. I've just sharpened these this morning, so it's real sharp. And then slowly add your blade onto the wood by using that little thumb screw behind the toad. And this being planed maple, it's highly figured, so it's a bit tricky to plane. But if you just take off these very fine and thin shavings and take your time, you should be fine, and you shouldn't experience too much tear out. Look at this, beautiful. And of course, while you are planing, make sure to check regularly on your progress. If you're keeping your edge nice and square to the rest, and when you're straight. And as soon as it's nice and straight, we're ready to take it to the bandsaw. Yeah, now we can take it to the bandsaw. So here we go. I've marked the width for the first strip of flamed maple and I kept it approximately 1 millimeter wider than I needed. And I've also set up my fence a bit wide. So I should end up with a strip that's approximately 1 to 2 millimeters too wide, hopefully. I've set the height for the bandsaw fence correctly and I'm going to use this bow to keep my maple in place. Turn on the vacuum and let's start cutting. The first strip cut, I can put this aside for a moment. I'm going to use my thickness planer or thickness sander in a moment to get it to the final thickness. But before I can cut the second strip of maple, I need of course to plane this side, back and nice and straight once again. And this is a bit of a back and forth process of planing down the side until it's nice and straight and square. Cut a strip on the bandsaw, put it aside, plane it one of the sides again and keep cutting the strips I need. Fortunately, I only need 2 strips of maple and the mahogany is a whole lot easier to plane and cut in comparison to the maple. So yeah. Take my plane once again. Let's first check if I need to do much to it when it comes to being square. So no, so I only have to just take off the saw marks left by the bandsaw. That should be nice and quick. Here we go. I'm already noticing a bit of a high spot right here. Get rid of that first. Ease off the plate a bit. And always remember when you're backing off your plane blade that you should turn the wheel back down until it engages again, so your blade doesn't kick up. Here we go. All right, here we go. Yep, nice and square and straight. So now all I have to do is mark the width of the strip I'm going to use. I'm going to need, come on, something like so. And then mark it and run it to the bandsaw. Another strip, ready to go. The 2 strips of maple are done and I can put them aside for now until it's time to run them to the thickness sander. But of course I want to do them simultaneously with the stripe of mahogany. So it's time to cut this beast to size, and I'm first going to start by taking the top off. This piece is way too high, so I think the best way is to take the top off and then start cutting the individual sections for the neck blank. So yeah, let's first cut it to height using, of course, the bandsaw. Big piece of mahogany cut to size, and I think this top part is still a perfectly quarter sawn neck blank. If I ever wanted to do a neck with a scarf joint, I think this is a perfect piece, and otherwise I can use it on other projects. So put this aside. So I'm going to focus on this big piece now, and yeah, the top surface is a bit rough from, of course, cutting it on the bandsaw, but instead of using my plane to flatten it out, I think I'm going to take a shortcut and run it through my thickness sander once or twice, because it's just the height I want to clean up a bit, and then start cutting the strips. So the sides are more important in this case. So yeah, I'm going to run this through the thickness sander real quick. You guys are now practically outside the workshop, so I have some room to work and feed this neck blank through the thickness sander. So, some dust extraction. Much easier, much quicker than doing it by hand, and of course you can use hand plane, sandpaper, whatever to get this nice and smooth again. But I have invested in this thickness sander, so it makes my life a lot easier. So now that the mahogany is nice and smooth and all square and nice and straight coming from the thickness sander, it's time to start marking out the other three remaining pieces I need for the neck blank. And I'm going to start with the center stripe, so to say, so the smaller or the narrower center stripe. And I'm just going to use my square and mark it. And you can make these strips, these center stripes, or whatever you like to call them, in the neck blank, as wide or narrow as you like them to be. I'm using 10 millimeters, but you're free to use whatever you like. Some even like them to make them into a taper, so they're always running nice and parallel to the sides of the neck. I just keep them straight. It's something I like to see, and it's much easier to do. So yeah, I've marked that thin center strip. I'm going to cut it again on the bandsaw, then run both the mahogany and the flame maple strips through the thickness sander, so I have my 3 stripes ready to go. And then the last 2 remaining sides of the neck blank come from this piece of mahogany as well. So yeah, there's nothing else to do than just go to the bandsaw, cut out all the pieces, plane them, sand them, and you name it, until we have everything prepared for the glue up of this neck blank. I've got the 3 center strips cut out, so it's the only thing left to do is the 2 wider pieces of mahogany for either side of the neck, or each side of the neck, and I need them to be at least 3.5 centimeters wide, so I get a total of 10 centimeters for the entire neck width, or 100 millimeters. And I'm in luck. The leftover piece of mahogany is exactly 80 millimeters, so I only have to cut this in half, plane all the sides, and put it through the thickness sander, and they should be ready to go. So it's 40 mils here, 40 mils on the other side. Always make 3 or more marks. It's more accurate to align 3 marks instead of just 2. Because if one of the 3 marks is off, you know you've done something wrong. And if all 3 align, then you've done a good job. So just a single cut on the bandsaw left, and then we have all pieces of the neck blank done. And here we go. There was a lot of tension in this piece of mahogany. I don't know if it will show up on camera because it tends to focus on my head. But you can see here these two pieces are touching, and you can see by the mark at the end that this is indeed how they were originally. You can see how much it opens up in the middle and closes at the end again. So there has been a lot of tension in this board, and yeah, I think the best thing to do for me right now is to maybe not even playing them at this point. I think I'm going to leave them at least overnight, but maybe wait 1 or 2 days, maybe wait out the weekend before I do anything to this. Hopefully they will cut back, they will shrink back a bit, or at least when I know they are not moving any further, then I can use my plane and thickness sander to get them nice and straight again. But yeah, I never had this dry wood or timber move on me this much when cutting it on the bandsaw. I know it can happen, but I have never had it happen to me before. So yeah, let's put them aside at least overnight, and then for you guys I'll be right back. And I'm back in the shop, and for you it's just been a couple of seconds, but for me it's been a couple of days since recording the last clip. So yeah, the time dilation might get confusing for me, but I'll do my best. So yeah, in these days, like I said in the previous clip, the wood had time to relax a bit, and indeed it has straightened itself out just ever so slightly. But it being a couple of days since working on this, on these pieces of the neck, I'm fairly certain that any stresses, any tension that might have been in these pieces of wood have relaxed out by now. So I'm not worried about the neck twisting or cupping or bowing to any extremes once we finish this neck blank and start creating the neck from it. So yeah, first causes of action are of course getting these two side pieces of mahogany nice and straight, at least the parts I'm going to glue up in a couple of moments, and of course trim these strips, the maple strips, to length, get everything to the correct thickness, everything nice and flat before starting, before we're able to glue up this neck blank. So first things first, I'm going to take my hand planes and most likely my sander to get these two sides of the neck nice and straight. So but before I'm going to straighten everything out, first I want to show you how I'm going to arrange these pieces for the neck blank in order to even further prevent movement wrapping once the neck blank is done and we're going to make the neck. I like to arrange the grain in a certain direction for my neck blanks, and that also helps me to determine what sides of these pieces of wood I need to focus on when it comes to getting the nice straight and square. So let me zoom in on the grain and I'll show you how I like to arrange my neck blanks. So let's take a look at the grain direction and how I like to arrange my neck blanks. I've used a pencil to highlight the grain direction, so hopefully it shows up on camera a bit better. And as you can see, I like my grain direction to be mirrored. So the grains on this side of the neck go almost diagonal into the bottom part of the neck blank, and the other side is mirrored. So any warping or any movement in these two pieces of wood in theory would be cancelled out in this neck blank because they're mirrored. Those forces will always be opposite to one another, cancelling each other out. Same goes for the two maple strips in the inside. You can see the grain direction runs like so, so it's a sort of a curved to the center, and same goes for the other side. So again, if these pieces, which is highly unlikely, decide to move, also in theory these forces would cancel each other out. This is the order I'm going to glue up these pieces of wood for my neck blank. So I'm going to mark the arrangement by marking what the top is and saying this is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and later on I'm going to get the ebony veneer and cut strips to go in between all these separate pieces. Yeah, it's started to rain, so hopefully the mic doesn't pick up too much noise coming from the rain. But yeah, first thing I need to do is of course use my hand planes and sander, like I said, to straighten out these outer sides of our neck blank. So I clamped the first piece in my side vise, and yeah, I really like my workbench. The height adjustability is great, but yeah, as you've seen in this video, it doesn't seem that stable, and to be honest with you guys, it looks worse on camera than it actually is. But I really need to order a steel plate to go under the base of this workbench. It's not the workbench itself that's unstable, but it's the wooden floor it's bolted to. It's just bolted to the wooden planks and maybe one support beam underneath my floor, but it's the floor that's a bit too flexible to support the forces I put on this workbench, especially at this height. As I lower the workbench, it becomes less wobbly, but yeah, I'm fairly tall, so I need a high workbench, and of course that means it's more wobbly. So let's select a plane. I'm going to use my low angle block plane because I already noticed that the grain pattern is a bit crisscross on this piece of mahogany. That might also explain why it moved the way it did. Of course, before I start planing, I have to analyze what needs to be done, and I know already for this piece there's a hump in the middle, so my straight edge is rocking. So the first thing I need to do is take a bit of material from the center and then plane it nice and flat. And I made some reference marks on the side, so I know this is my gluing surface, and I have to make sure it's nice and square to these sides, especially the top of the neck blank. So nice and sharp plane. Oh, no. A lot of tear out, so I think this is going to be very difficult to plane, even with a low angled block plane with a very tight gap. It's going to be challenging to plane this down. Well, usually mahogany is more easy to plane, but yeah, it has a wild grain pattern. If you're experiencing a lot of tear out when planing in one direction in a certain area, just flip your workpiece around. I'm in luck, I can move to both sides of my bench, but if you can't, or if you're filming and want to look at the camera, it's nice that you can you have to flip your workpiece around. And of course, when planing, check regularly. Yeah, I think you might have seen enough planing in one video already, so I'm going to do this off camera. This is maybe one thing I will be doing in, for example, a live stream in the future. If you like to see me plane and find it relaxing to hear me talk while I'm doing yeah, repetitive tasks, yeah, just let me know, and I might do things like this, like planing, filing, sanding, you name it, those time-consuming things in a live stream. So yeah, I'm going to take this off camera and I'll be back with you for the next step in just a moment. So I'm done planing and I'm really happy with how these sides of this neck blank turned out. They're now nice, flat, square and straight, and when I put these two sides together, so the gluing surfaces, putting the two gluing surfaces on top of each other, so my English, and when I apply just a little pressure with my fingers, I don't see any gaps, no seam visible, or almost no seam visible, so they're perfect and ready for glue up. Now the next thing to do is, of course, get these 3 center strips to thickness, but first I'm going to cut these 2 maple strips to length, because why waste time on sending the entire length to thickness when I don't need it. And I also saw that one of the ends was a bit twisted, so I'm going to cut it off using a Japanese saw. Let's see if I can identify the twist. One of the ends. This end is more twisted than the other. So put these aside. Pencil. That's one. Here's the other. Let's cut these to length. And then onto the thickness sander. For the scripts pile. And another one. Let's go to the thickness sander. Get the thickness sander out. Of course, connect dust extraction. Very important. This is a very good dust maker. I'm going to start by setting the height for the thickest strip I'm going to sand down. Let's see if they all fit. Yeah, and I'm going to pass them through one at a time at the same setting. So with every pass I make, I'm going to make sure I sand all 3 of them, whether or not the sander is already taking material off from one and not from another. I always going to pass them through at the same setting, so to say. My dust extraction is hooked up. I've got the thickness set, so yeah, I'm going to make some noise by turning on the dust extraction, and very important to have a dust extraction running with a thickness sander. I don't think there's any machine in my workshop that makes more dust than this sander. I don't set it to a too fast setting. of the strips are now sanded to the correct thickness, so it's time to get the ebony veneer and start cutting some strips of veneer, and then it's finally time to glue up this neck blank. So here I've got my roll of ebony veneer. It's about 0.7 mils thick, so it's very, very fragile, and that's why we've wrapped it in this plastic to prevent it from tearing. If you just use a couple of pieces of masking tape, for example, you have a chance it tears on its own and you end up with all kinds of nasty little strips of veneer. So unwrap it carefully. And you can see the edges fringing, and if you just tape it together you have a chance that the fringes will just unwrap themselves, and that would be a bit of a shame because this ebony veneer, it's not cheap. And you can see it very easily tears on itself. I'm going to very carefully unfold it. So this is going to be a bit tricky. First thing I'm going to do is see if I can cut it to length in such a way that I can make multiple necks out of this one sheet, and I think I can by cutting it right here perhaps, so it becomes a bit more manageable. I have a scrap piece of plywood on my workbench that I can use as a cutting board, and let's see how to it's I can't say this enough, it's so fragile and expensive, so yeah, take care. And I don't want to mess this up, so square up my straight edge. And I'm using a very sharp carver's knife to cut this. You can of course use a scalpel or a box cutter or something, but just make sure it's very sharp. I'm a bit scared, to be honest. Maybe if I can. Yeah, here we are. I'm going to put this aside somewhere. I've stuck the piece of ebony veneer I'm going to work with to a scrap piece of multiply using masking tape, and note that I've used the masking tape over the entire width instead of using single strips. Tape it down real good, because like with the entire roll it will fringe and those fringes will curl back, so make sure it's nice and flat. Tape to a surface you can cut on, and then I'm going to use the mahogany strip as a cutting guide or a cutting template, and a very sharp knife, and start cutting 4 ebony strips. I need 4 strips, I think 1, 2 on each side. Yeah, 4 strips. So let's start cutting, and I'm going to start by cutting it in the length. And like I said, use a very sharp knife you can trust on, because the ebony veneer can split on one of the grains and give you all kinds of trouble, wasting some material. So make sure you make a nice and consistent cut. Some even use 2 scrap sheets of MDF or multiply or plywood, whatever sheet material they have, sandwich the ebony veneer in between and then run it to a table saw to cut strips, because cutting it can be a bit tricky, and that's why I'm using the mahogany strip as a template instead of using one of my straight edges or one of my rulers, because this is nice, a bit heavier, wide enough so I can hold it in place, and it has a bit more friction to the ebony material instead of a stainless steel ruler. It tends to slide all over the place, and that's also why I'm using a sturdier knife instead of a scalpel or a box cutter or something. I'm using a very sharp carver's knife. Cut it on either side. Ooh, I have to be so careful. Here's one of the strips, and I'm going to gently put it aside. And onto the next one. There is some fringing going on here, so I have to So, and with that the final strip is cut, and I'm going to put this aside, clean up, and then it's finally time to glue together our neck blank. So, ready to start gluing this neck blank. I've set up the stack I'm going to glue together, and I made multiple marks so I don't misalign these pieces of wood. So I've marked them with an L on the left side, an R on the right side. There's arrows pointing towards the center, and you name it. So everything to hopefully have me glue these pieces of wood in the right order. To help me glue everything together, I made this little jig. It's a very simple jig, just 2 pieces of timber, 2 slats with grooves in them, and I can use just regular clamps and set these into these grooves, and this helps me glue everything together. So nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just a couple of scraps and some tiny clamps. These are my initial clamps, and when everything is aligned and glued together, I can put on some more clamps, some more beefier clamps. But looking by the stack of it, I can just clamp this together with my 2 fingers, so there's not a lot of force needed to clamp everything down. So yeah, next step is of course applying glue. And how am I going to do this the easiest? I think I'm going to put these here. New shop, everything is having to come together. So First piece, some regular tight bond, and I managed to find myself a roller, and I hope this helps me apply the glue nice and even without overdoing it. Come on. Alright, here we go. More. Don't overdo the glue, but make sure there's enough. That's one into the jig, and next up, little strip. This a bit differently to start off with. These strips make it a bit more difficult, to be honest. Yeah, like this. This is not what I intended to do. Oh my god. But here we go. I now know why all these YouTubers making cutting boards often do this in time lapse, because it's very finicky. So this one has to go there. This one needs to go here. I think I'm first going to stick the veneer to this side. Let's see, this is the right side, so this needs to go here. Oh yeah, this is the way to go. First stick the veneer to the little piece. Let's see, this is the right side. This needs to go here, like so. All right, I'm getting the hang of it. So the right side, stick the veneer to this side. Always stressful, a glue up like this. But hey, we're almost there. Oh wow, this is the last one. Here we go. So very nice. Use some bigger clamps. Unfortunately my filler block isn't quite up to it. Let's see. I couldn't find my filler block. Some more clamps, and not because I need the pressure to pull everything together, but it's more to evenly spread the pressure while the glue sets. So not much force needed at all. Everything is nicely stuck together now, and from now on it's just a waiting game until the glue fully set, and then I can take off the clamps, take out the planes once more, and then plane down the top and the bottom of this neck blank once more before we can finally start making the neck for the Phoenix guitar build. So it's early next day and the glue has set overnight, so it's time to remove all the clamps and start planing this neck blank so it's ready to actually start making a neck. So here's our neck blank, or almost neck blank. So I've got the neck blank clamped in the vise of my workbench, and I've taken out two of my most often used planes, of course a number 4 and a number 7. I will most likely start out with the number 4 to get rid of the obvious high spots, and then follow up with my number 7 to get everything nice and straight. And that's how I usually work. I use whatever plane works best for me at that time, and yeah, I really like my number 7. I use this the most because it's nice and heavy, has a nice long and wide reference surface, and just the weight alone makes planing much easier. Of course, make sure they're nice and sharp, and keep a sharpening stone or a leather strap close by to sharpen often in between. As soon as you notice your plane is dulling out, just take a couple of minutes to resharpen it. It makes your life a whole lot easier. So yeah, let's start planing. Put my number 7 to the side. the obvious high spots are gone already, so I think I can already take out my number 7. And do a shallow first pass. Again, I'm taking off the smallest amount possible, so making very shallow cuts with my plane. And that's because the grain direction on each side of the neck is different, because we've mirrored the pieces of wood. And also the flamed maple, of course, highly figured, very prone to tear out. So I like to use a very light cut, so very shallow cuts to plane down my neck blanks. And this also makes it easier when I'm going off square to easily correct it. When I make a couple of passes, I'm not as quick out of square as I would be if I was taking off very large amount with each pass. So it's much easier to stay square and to stay nice and flat when using shallow passes. And as a bonus, it's much easier on your arms and body as well. It doesn't take that much strength or force to make these nice and shallow cuts. Thin shavings. Again, for another planing tip is, when you're starting your cut, have all your weight on the knob, start planing, transition to the back of your plane, and when you're at the end of your cut, only have force or pressure on the back of your plane. And then it helps that your plane has a good weight of its own. And I saw in the comments on one of my videos that someone loved the sound of my plane, so this is for you. And again, I really love how thin these shavings are. Planing is a skill you have to practice, and you just have to do a lot, and it's something I find very hard to explain in a video, because it has so much to do with experience with feeling how the wood is reacting to your plane, how your plane is set up. I've set up my plane to how I like it. For me, I even customized the handle, and I think my experience with my plane is quite different than I would be using your plane. So, and that's why I really can't give tips on how to set up a plane, because I think it's highly personal. Most important thing I think is making sure it feels good to you and make sure it's absolutely as sharp as you can get it. It makes all the difference. Let's check the neck blank. I think I'm almost there. When I'm checking if my neck blank is square, I'm not checking against the side of the neck blank, because that's not important to me. In the next episode we'll be cutting this away anyway. I'm not going to use it as a reference surface or anything. So for me the most important part is that my top surface, where the fretboard is going to be glued on in the near future, is square to the center. So I'm going to check against this little black line if my neck blank is square right now. This side seems to be square. It doesn't show up as easy on camera. Maybe like this, and you can see that the maple strip is running parallel to my little square. So the top surface is nice and square. Now of course I have to make sure it's also nice and flat and there's no twist going on. And of course to check if your neck blank is nice and straight, and also to check for twist to some extent, I'm gonna use a straight edge. And you often see me not only check with the straight edge parallel to the workpiece or parallel to the neck blank, but you often see me check like this in a diagonal fashion, and that's to check for twist. If there's some twist going on, let's say this corner is raised a little so the twist is a bit like so, you will see light appear also in the middle of your straight edge. So if this was raised, of course I would see light appearing in the middle of the straight edge. Same goes for the other side. If this was lower, let's say I check like this and everything is nice and straight, but as soon as I do this and this side of the neck would be lower than the rest of the neck, I would see light appearing at the end of my straight edge, if that makes sense. So you can check for twist by using your straight edge at an angle. And that's usually how I check if my neck blank is nice and straight. And wow, I didn't expect it to be that straight and flat already. So I'm done with the top side. It's nice and square, it's flat, and now I have to do the back side. I could leave the back as is, because like I said, the only thing I'm concerned about at the moment is the top, because this is where I'm going to route the truss rod, and as soon as the truss rod channel is routed I'm going to cut up this blank anyway. But yeah, I like to clean up the back of this neck blank ever so slightly as well, so it looks a bit cleaner, but it isn't really necessary. Same goes for the side. There's no need, unless you're using a guide for your router that needs a reference surface that's parallel, dead parallel to the center line. Of course you need to address the sides, but I'm using a jig that clamps on the sides and is adjustable, so I'm not too worried about the sides, so I'm not going to waste any time on that. The only thing I'm going to do is just clean up the back a little and make sure I mark this side of the neck blank as being the top. So the neck blank is done. Off camera I cleaned up the back somewhat, so now it's nice, flat, square to the center line, no twist, so it has everything a nice neck blank should have, and I'm really happy with the end result, and I can't wait to start crafting a neck from this neck blank. But unfortunately that will be in the next video. So if you want to follow along with this guitar build, make sure you are subscribed to my channel and have your notifications set to notify all. There is some YouTube shenanigans going on where YouTube doesn't always show you new content from the channels you're subscribed to if you haven't set your notification to notify all. Otherwise YouTube will send you an assumption, their assumption of what you are most likely are willing to watch. So if you want to make sure you get notified when I upload something, you set your notification bell to this channel to notify all. So yeah, thank you very much. If you liked this video, of course, let me know by leaving a like. It really helps out a lot. And if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, let me know in the comment section down below. I know I don't always respond to all the comments I get, but I get a lot of comments, so sometimes it's hard to keep track. And be assured I do read most of my comments, and if I see something interesting I always make a note for myself, a mental note or a note on a to-do list for future video ideas and comments I really want to do something with. So yeah, your comments will be read. So yeah, if you have any questions, suggestions, let me know in the comment section. That's it for this week's video. I hope you liked it, and yeah, I don't know when the next video will go live because this weekend I'm going to take a break with some friends and family, visiting the Veluwe Natural Park, do some hiking, do some barbecuing. So this weekend I'm away from the workshop, away from the office, but be assured as soon as I come back I start recording the next video and upload it as soon as possible. So there might be a gap of 1 or 2 weeks before I upload the new one. So yeah, that's very important. You set your notification bells to notify all if you want to follow along with this guitar build. So enough said. I'm off for the weekend, so I hope to see you all in the next video. But until then, as always, take care. Bye bye.